Thank you very much. Let's get right into it. United States. What I'm going to do is talk about the United States and talk about it and look at it, see what wood has an impact in statistical data. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the history, and then we're going to talk a little bit about today to figure out why wood culture should be extremely important to the United States of America. You can see we have about 313 million people, about a third to a fourth the size of China, so we're small. We're third country in volume of standing timber, third in timber growth still exceeds harvest. In other words, we're growing more than we're harvesting. Don't look surprised, it's been since 1920. I have a chart to show it. Per capita yearly consumption is about 1.8 cubic meters, which is 4 times the world average, which means the United States is a very consumptive country in just about everything. Look at energy, same difference. We only use about 3% of the energy, 3% of the wood material, 3% of the energy is from wood or woody bio-based material, and most of that is in wood companies. Let's look at North America just to give you a perspective here. Canada, which has more forest land than the United States, but not as consumptive. New Mexico is small. So if we just look at North America, the United States stands out as far as wood. Let's look at U.S. percent of totals. Population, it's only 5%. It's only 7% of the land area. But we get down to the bottom when we say timber used for industrial production, we're using about 27%. So we're using a lot of forest products. Therefore, we should be very interested in wood culture. Let's look at the way the United States is set up as far as forest land, as ownership, because it's very important. If you go out west, which is to my left and to the left over here, you'll find out we have a lot of forest land, but it's owned by the government, basically. It's federal, state lands, and other things. Not too many private lands, but we have a fair amount of forested land. If we go to the United States on the right, and this is just the contiguous United States, not Alaska and Hawaii, you see there's a lot of forest land, but it's mainly private. That has a tremendous impact on the culture of wood in the United States. Let's look at the history of the United States. The United States became a country in 1776, and we had about 60% of our land was forest land. What's happened from 1980 to 1920? Things have changed drastically. And that has to do with the expansion in the United States. As people moved west, what did they want to do? Well, we'll get into that. This is the growth removals of the U.S. forests. I don't have the count for 2011. They're working on it, but it really hasn't changed that much. We have a lot more growth compared to removals. And if you're surprised about that, the diameter of what's there now is getting smaller. We're just getting more smaller trees. So the very large old growth is not there as it was 100 years ago. Let's look at our history. English settlers in 1607 in Jamestown, Virginia. They come into this country, and what do? They cut down the trees around the area to build landings and a place to stay and other things like that. This is going to increase tremendously because at the time there were people living here, and they viewed the forest a little differently than the people that came over from Europe. Let's look at our history about the time of our before our revolution, but the person who would be our first president, George Washington. Mythology, we'll say, was the story of the cherry tree where he honestly told his father he didn't cut down the prized cherry tree. We don't know if this is really true. He was about 7, somewhere around 1738, or it was 6 or 7 in any event. But this has to do with trees and forest. And this mythology moved on in the United States and impacted what we're talking about with regards to forest and trees. This is what happened in the United States, which helped to show the decline of forest area. What happens to the people? They start settling the land. They move out from the East Coast. They moved into the interior. What do? They cut down trees. They clear it to build a house. What's the house made of? Mostly wood. What's the wagon in the back? Mostly wood, wooden wheels, wooden wagon with some canvas on it. What's about the furniture? They use this material to make their furniture. They use the forest very extensively. What do you think that smokestack is coming out? That's energy produced by wood. These people need food to eat, so they had to clear the land to make sure they had open land in order to make crops. In the United States right now, we're a food basket for the world because a lot of the cleared land is now being used to grow crops. They also, when they moved in other places, farms in the South, they used fences, used a lot of timber for fences, and also we had a big railroad emphasis in the United States in 1869. I believe it was that year we completed the railroad from one end of the country to the other. We used a lot of wooden trestles. Lots of wood was cut down. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, things were getting pretty hectic. We started developing what I'll say is folklore. This is called Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox. A lot of people in the United States are very familiar with that. It started about 1910. Paul Bunyan cut down lots of trees, lots of fables with regards to him, and he had his blue ox to go along with it. But this glorified the cutting down of trees. And Paul Bunyan represented a person who could cut a swath of trees with one swing and would be for miles long. Well, all this stuff sort of added up and things got a little hectic in the United States. We have devastation from these clear cuts. Paul Bunyan might exemplify that. And we also had fires, really severe fires in the early 1900s. People build their homes in the middle of the forest. The forests do what they do naturally. They have fires in order to cut down underbrush and let the strongest survive. Unfortunately, as man moved on, we started having fires like this. And in fact, within the last few months, we've had severe fires in New Mexico and Colorado, which have destroyed hundreds of homes, and several people have died because of that. But throughout our history, we've had this problem. I'll call it a problem because fires are a danger to human beings. If you look at a tree, in the old days, that wasn't a problem. Well, what happens? I work for an organization called the U.S. Forest Service. So one of the things the U.S. Forest Service did, and you saw a lot of lands in the West that were federal lands, is to try to cut back on forest fires. So everybody, at least in the United States, has heard of Smokey Bear and the forest fire. He used to say only you can prevent forest fires. Now he says prevent wildfires because we've determined that in some instances fire can be beneficial. Then we came along with woodsy owl and pollution. Lend a hand, care for the land is today's slogan. It used to be give a hoot, don't pollute. But when you look at this, these characters are part of our wood culture. And they came about because of our development and because some of our development was not done in a very smart way. Let's look at importance in the United States. In the United States, one of the biggest uses of timber is for homes. We build lots of homes every year, and most of our homes, not all of them, the base for the homes, the structure, the outline is made of wood. We use lots of wood in homes. One of the impacts lately has been that we are not building as many homes because we've had somewhat of a recession. I guess the world has too, Europe and other places. In any event, we're probably building housing starts about 37% of what we did 10 years ago, which is significant. And it's significant in affected other countries, like what we do with our timber, like Canada, who was sending down lots of timber into our country. But this home construction really affects wood culture in the United States, because it's almost at one time proportional to the amount of wood we use. Because when you build a new house, you put furniture in the house. You maybe put a fence around the house. And I can go through it. So you use a lot more wood products. And part of our culture is that we use wood to build our homes. And that's very important. Now, besides these other things, we also build solid wood products. And here are some examples of some that are pretty nice, like cedar chest. When I was young, people always talked about that. You could store your clothes in it, had a very nice smell, kept moths away. That's the cedar chest on the left. Also, we have guitars and musical instruments, just like the discussion we had earlier today. Bird's eye maple and other very nice species are used to make these products. Also, we do a lot of hunting in the United States because we still have a few places where you can go out, go hunting, and probably even in Vermont. So in any event, it's very important for people who own guns to have interesting gun stocks. And I used to work in the Forest Service, and we work with walnut, and that's a walnut gun stock. Now, as we move on with wood, and historically, what's important is we call what's called a carbohydrate economy. This is for the future. This is our future wood culture. And what we're talking about is growing short rotation wood, which you'll see in the bottom here, which has been done for some time. Try to grow it for energy, which we're supposed to be using more of. I don't know whether that'll really happen, and even make plastic from it. Because you have to remember that wood is basically made of cellulose. There are other components, hemicellulose and lignin. They're organic compounds. And we have the chemistry today where we can break it down into just about its basic components and build it back up again. So we could easily have ethanol. It's not a hard thing to make from wood. What's hard about it is the economics. And the economics are very important. So the future will decide whether these type of items will indeed become important, and we'll just see what happens in the future. But it's really going to be driven on economics. But this is still also part of our wood culture. What we do with wood, how we tie into these things, what's important to mankind. Let's look at the positive forest products publicity. Wood is the environmental material. And we've heard that from several. It's a sustainable material, unlike a lot of our metal materials like aluminum and steel and other things. And wood use is the gateway to a sustainable future for mankind. I've been working with that in the Forest Service, and wood culture, I believe, certainly believes in that as well as I believe in that. Now let's talk about some of the things in the future. And how much time do I have?
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'll just shoot a few of these down. These are things that we're doing. This is the All Division 5 conference in Estoril, Portugal in July of this year. I think you can see Mike Howe in the picture, and Jingling Su is in the picture, and I won't go through all the names in the picture. You see, it's a pretty diverse group from all over the world. We work with the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, which I've been active in since 1980, so that's a while. And we're working with them to work with wood culture, and it's been very effective. We just finished a big meeting in Estoril, Portugal, and we had, looking at the audience, about 50 or so people, about 550 overall. And Andrew Long is the head of Division 5. He was basically in charge of the meeting because he's the overall head of our division. Also, I want to publicize that we will have a meeting in Utah, which is an interesting part of the United States. And it's coming up in 2014, and we're looking for papers to be presented in that area. We'll somehow team with other people. And generally at the UFO congresses, we get 2,000 to 3,000 people. So for us, that's pretty sizable. And many of us that are sitting down here in the room that have presented have been active in this type of organization and are very familiar with these type of meetings. And with that, I'll say xie. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being at the meeting and presenting for you.
Thank you, Howard. We've got time for a question or two if you'd like to ask Howard. Any questions on the floor?
Any controversial things you want to throw my way?
I'll ask you a question, Howard.
Yeah.
How do you see the production and the use of wood really in the future with the United States and North America? I mean, you made a presentation, but have you got any projections for that?
Yeah, I think since we're sort of a breadbasket for wood in the world too, I think Brazil and Russia have more wood than we do, and Russia has a hard time getting to it. I think the future is very bright for the United States. I believe now on the West Coast we're shipping a lot of wood to China. And so we'll still remain important in wood. You saw how much wood we have. We have more wood than we had 80, 90 years ago, according to the forest inventory work, which is done right. The main part of it is written up right where I'm working right now. So yeah, I think the future is bright, and I think it's very important. The United States will continue to maintain a high value of wood culture and also a high amount of timber that will be processed either for our internal use or external use.
Thanks, Howard. Questions from the audience? Anyone? Yes.
Andrew? Yes.
Are trees being felled to make way for other land use?
They always are being.
Excuse me, let's have him ask the question on the mic so everyone can hear.
Sorry, are trees being felled to make way for other land use like housing, or are there areas that you could use and leave the forest alone and grow more trees in the States, for example?
The answer is yes. It's always a dynamic, and I would say whether you have little trees or a lot of trees in any country, it's a dynamic. There was a large dam built in China several years ago. Probably a lot of trees were moved because of that. The United States builds homes. They have developments in cities. Trees will be removed. It's also important that trees be grown in other places too. You saw the example of Vermont that overcut its trees, and eventually they grew them back again, and they have them in the country. So our country will continue to modify its land use. And if you want to look at the south of the United States, we are now in our fourth forest, which means we grow the trees, we cut them down, and slowly work them in over years, which is southern pine, which is used in a lot of housing construction. So we are a constantly changing country, and I think we will be. But the statistics show that even though we're constantly changing, the amount of timber is still the same, is still more than it was 90 years ago. So that's my feeling. We have more people. That's important. You get more people, they have to live in a place. So we can go up or out. It's gone more up than we have. We've been out, but I think in China they've gone out, meaning spreading out cities. We're spreading out our cities, but we're growing trees in other places.
All right. Any other question? We've got time for one more. Question? Yes. Let's wait for the mic.
Thank you. I was just checking some facts here, reported facts, Howard. We all know about reports. According to the New York Times, between 2000 and 2005, of the 7 most heavily forested nations on Earth, the United States suffered the greatest loss of timberland, about 6%. More than 119,000 square kilometers. Is that largely due to forest burning?
Let's see. No, I don't think so. I don't think we burned enough timber to do that. So I can't say we haven't lost forest land, but I can say we haven't lost timber. There's a difference between the two. We've also lost a large amount of timber to insects and disease. You can fly over certain areas in the west and the east and see it. That has been a significant change. I don't know how much we get into semantic definition. What is the definition of forest land? It can be very tricky. So when a beetle kill comes through, I don't know whether they redefine that land now as not forest land anymore. I don't think they do. So if we lost forest land, we probably lost it to housing, crop development, and other things. I don't think killing of insects, and somebody could prove me wrong, I don't know, and also for forest fires, I don't think that's affected the impact on our forest land. I think it's been more towards development. That's my opinion. Development including farming. But the land we do have that's forested is still producing the same amount of material.
All right. Thank you, Howard.